Hello everyone, and welcome to the second episode of Tanking Made Easy. Now today we're going to talk about perhaps the tank's most important job in a 5-man dungeon. This does not apply to raids, but in a 5-man dungeon when you're running heroics, mythics, mythic plus, this is the most important job you have, and that is pacing and timing. Now a big overarching general rule of thumb is if you're not in combat in your mythic plus, then you're wasting time you could be using to travel between mobs to get that extra chest. However, this is not always true. If your healer needs mana, if your healer is below 15 or 20% mana, then you definitely need to stop and let your healer mana up a little bit. Even just exiting combat increases mana regeneration by a lot. Something else a healer should be doing is providing their own water if there is no mage in the group. Now, if your healer is above 20% mana, you can definitely go ahead and pull another trash mob. However, for a dungeon boss, you should wait for 50% mana. If your healer is above 50% mana, you have nothing to worry about. You can pull 1 or 2 packs together. You can pull a boss. As long as you still have active mitigation up and you keep doing your normal tanking rotation, you should definitely be okay with that much mana. Something else that really helps out with pacing and timing is knowing the dungeon that you're running. Now, before you jump into Mythic Plus and try to do +3 chests on every single run, you should definitely run that dungeon in Mythic mode. Now, what this is going to do is it's going to help familiarize you with all the mobs and how hard they hit. If the mobs are a lot smaller and they don't hit you that much, you can definitely pull 2, 3, maybe even 4 packs if you pop some cooldowns. However, if the mobs are like in this run in Eltharian's Lair, the scorpions at the end, you do not want to pull 2 or more of those at the same time because those scorpions will make you go down as a tank. Another thing that I don't see a lot of tanks do is to rotate your cooldowns. The reason why you have 1, 2, 3, and even 5-minute cooldowns is so that you can rotate them. Now let's say you're trying to push in +3. The way to do this is by utilizing your cooldowns a lot more efficiently. Instead of pulling 2 packs, pull 3 or 4, but pop one of your big cooldowns so that you don't go down to those mobs. Something else to note with tanking cooldowns is you get the most bang for your buck when you pop them in sequence. If you stack 1 or 2 or 3 or more cooldowns, you're not going to be getting as much use out of them. The best use for your cooldowns is to pop one, then another, then another. For me, for example, as a warrior, I like to use Demoralizing Shout whenever I'm starting to get overwhelmed. That's a 1-minute cooldown. When that runs out, I have a trinket that increases my armor by a big amount and increases physical mitigation by a certain percentage. I use that immediately after Demoralizing Shout goes down. Something else to note when you're trying to keep a good pace is to not walk back. Now what you do is you pull the mob, put them into position. Now if there's a pat or something like that that's going to run into you, what you should do is run into that pat, pick up aggro, and pop a defensive cooldown so you can survive and take down more mobs a little bit faster. Basically, you should embrace all the body pulls and try to use your cooldown so that you can survive every single pull that you do. Something else to note is to know the potential of your DPS. Now if you have really bad DPS and you pull 3 or 4 mobs, your cooldowns are going to run out before any of those mobs go down. Now in terms of what makes a good or a bad DPS, if all of your DPS is pulling 250k or more DPS, that's good damage. You can go ahead and feel free to double and triple pull with that kind of damage. One of the biggest things to point out when chain pulling is to know your priority. As a tank, you do have a lot of stamina, but you also have a lot of armor and a lot of mitigation through that. Now the priority that you should be taking down the mobs that are fighting you is casters, then ranged, and then melee. Now the reason why this is because us as tanks, we have the least amount of mitigation against spellcasters, and then against ranged we have very decent mitigation, and depending on what class you're playing, physical melee is going to be a lot easier to mitigate than physical ranged. So you should always try to take down the mobs in this order so that you can keep chain pulling. If you take down the casters and the ranged, you're going to have 1 or 2 more melees hitting you. You can snare them, run to the next mob, start picking up aggro, and the rest of your DPS can eliminate the melees that are behind you. A very, very big thing that I do see a lot of tanks miss, and I do play a healer as well, is that a lot of tanks think that because they are tanks, they can stand in the fire. Now the more you stand in fire or poison or any abilities that you should be dodging, the slower your run is going to go. Your healer is going to need to overheal and compensate for you ignoring mechanics, and that's going to put more stress on their mana. It's going to cause more downtime, and they're going to have to drink more often. So you should definitely have DBM, know the fights you're getting into, and you have to watch all of the mechanics. Just because you're a tank and you can sit there and take a hit or two doesn't mean you should if you can avoid it. Here in the background with this Neltharian's Lair that I'm running, you see me avoiding as much damage as I can, just because I want to get to that +3 chest with this random bug group. So overall, with pacing and with timing, as a tank, you need to keep an eye on your healer, on your healer's mana. Above 50%, green light, you can pull anything. Above 20, you can go ahead and pull trash, but don't pull a boss. And you should also know the capabilities of your DPS. Again, if they're above 250k, you have good damage dealers, you can go ahead and keep pulling. Anything lower than that, you might want to slow down and just aim for a +1 or a +2 chest run. I hope this helps out, and as always, good luck tanking out there.